Welcome, I'm Pauline from PQW. I'm delighted you can join me in this little session. We're going to talk about free motion quilting. I know it's a big struggle to a lot of you, so let me take you right back to basics. I'm going to put an L plate on you. We're going to learn to drive our sewing machine so that we can get better and better at free motion quilting. And I believe learning to free motion quilt is exactly like learning to drive a car. We have an accelerator and we have to steer the fabric. So we need to start slow. I think a lot of people think we've got to go flat out when we're free motion quilting. That does help, but you need to get practiced at going slow, you need to get practiced at all your curve shapes, and you need to get a mental image of a design in your brain so that you should never have to trace a design onto your fabric to quilt on. But as a beginner, I would suggest you get something really helpful to help you get the design onto your fabric, like a stencil. We have the great collection of feather stencils now for you to be able to trace your designs on. We have our great dot-to-dot templates that can allow you to mark beautiful designs onto your quilt. So, but watch other YouTube videos on that. We have lots out there for you to learn from. But let's get our machine set up for free motion quilting and let's take you through some little hints and tips to help you get on the road to being really good at free motion quilting. So now at the sewing machine, we need a foot on our machine that will allow us to free motion quilt. Now free motion quilting, if you've never done it before, is about moving the fabric under the needle. We're going to drop our feed dogs. These little teeth that sit on our machine, we need to drop those down. I have a button on the side of my machine that I can press in. That automatically drops my feed dogs. Now, all machines are different. Some machines it's in underneath around the bobbin area. Some machines there's a button at the front. Have a look at your manual or talk to your dealer about how you drop your feed dogs. If you cannot drop your feed dogs, put your stitch length to 0. That automatically disengages them. Now, use a good quality needle. I use the titanium top stitch needles because I want to penetrate through the 3 layers of fabrics. I don't want to get skip stitches. This needle works brilliantly for you. Size 80 titanium top stitch needles is the needles I use all the time. Now, talking about our foot, this is a free motion quilting foot for my machine. I use a Bernina. When I brought this machine, the foot that come with the machine was completely closed in. It was a complete circle, which meant if I wanted to stitch on a line or stitch in the ditch, I couldn't see where I was going. So I invested in the open toe free motion foot, and I think you can buy these for every brand of machine. Just give your model and the brand of your machine to your dealer. They should be able to supply you with the right foot. So we'll pop the foot on. We've got the feed dogs dropped. Now a couple of little other hints and tips is you don't want to put pressure on your shoulders because that really is agonising, particularly when you're quilting a big quilt like this. It just is difficult to sit at your machine for too long. So what I do, I always have 2 rubber door wedges under the back of the machine. Get these from the hardware store. Just tilt your machine forward and put those underneath. If you have a big extension table on your machine, you may be able to wind the legs up or down, but if you can't, buy 4 rubber door wedges. Put 2 under your machine and 2 under the back of your extension table. That way it'll all be on the same level. But by tilting the machine forward, I don't have to hunch over. So I have them under my machine for every bit of sewing I do. The other thing I would suggest to you, because we need to start you off at a slower speed, I'm going to have my machine on the highest speed, and I'm going to get you to learn to control the speed through your accelerator. So machine on highest speed. The best way you can control the speed of your needle is put your foot pedal directly under the needle. Now by doing that, it's going to allow you to sew slower, plus you're going to sit at much better posture, because when we put our foot pedal out to the right, and we do that because the cord comes out on the right-hand side, I find that our foot pedal keeps running away from us, and I also find that my right foot is too used to pushing the accelerator down too hard. So put it under, put your foot pedal directly under the needle and put your left foot on it. That will allow you to stitch at a much slower speed. Just drop this down. Then we're now going to sit with a much better posture. We're going to come in close to the machine. Now the next thing that we have struggled with, particularly if we're quilting a big quilt, it's getting that movement of that fabric sliding through. And I find that as we get the bulk of a quilt going through there, it really gets hard to push through. So to eliminate that, if you don't already have one, invest in a sew slip mat. Now it has the big cutout in it. That's where my feed dogs are going to work. I'm going to take the brown paper off the back of the mat. Keep that brown paper to store your mat back in if you're not going to be using it sometimes. Now we have a long section here and a shorter section. Now the short section is designed to come into the bed of your machine and the long section is designed to go out over your extension table. I don't use it that way. I like to use it so the long part comes to the front of the machine, because then I don't get any drag here. I want the quilt to slide up and over. But you know, you might like it a different way. Now the back side of this that I took the brown paper off, it's sticky, it's tacky, so it grabs to the bed of the machine. So what we need to do is draw our bobbin thread up through that hole so it's not stuck underneath the mat. Once we get our bobbin thread up, pat the mat so it adheres to your bed of your machine. Now when you take it off, there's no residue left on your machine, it's just tacky. It's not really sticky. You need to wash these mats regularly in hot soapy water because that sticky side will collect fluff and lint, and then one day it won't stick. So we give great care instruction sheets with this when you purchase them from us. So now we have a slippery surface, so when we put our fabric under here, we have no problem with moving the fabric under the needle. Now, one rule with free motion quilting, and this is the only rule I really give, is if we have our needle going too fast and we move our fabric slow, we're going to get really, really tiny stitches, which is not good. If we have the needle going slow and we move the fabric fast, we're going to get quite large stitches. So your first thing you need to do is when you're teaching yourself to free motion quilt is draw some straight lines on your fabrics. Just use a good quality marking pen. Draw some straight lines, you know, just get yourself a little ruler. Draw some straight lines and teach yourself to stitch on those lines to start with. Now I just need to get the right coloured lead in my pencil so that you can see what I'm doing here. So I need to use the dark lead. Now I've got a white lead again. Too many pencils. Okay, so I'm just going to draw some straight lines on this fabric. Now what we need to do is teach ourselves to stitch towards ourselves, we need to stitch backwards, and then we need to teach ourselves to stitch to the side. And it's just all about learning how the fabric moves under the needle till you get those stitches nice and even. So let's get started. Now, because when we put our pressure foot down, it doesn't sit right on the fabric, because we've got to have that movement so we can stitch in any direction. So if we don't keep pressure on our fabric, we're going to get very uneven stitches. So let's just get started. So now I would suggest that you put your hands in a V position like so, and just learn to get those stitches nice and even. Just go slow, and your left foot will control that speed for you nicely. Now when you've done a few rows like this, stitching towards yourself, come over to another line, and then we'll teach ourselves to go backwards. So what we're going to do when we go backwards, we pull the fabric forward, because a lot of people, when I teach this as a hands-on class, they go to press the reverse button to go backwards. You don't need to do that when you're free motion quilting, because you're pulling the fabric in the direction you want to go. Now when you want to teach yourself to stitch to the side, we'll just get rid of this thread. We're just going to position our hands, and we're going to as I stitch to my right, I pull my fabric with my left hand. Stitch up to your hand, stop, and then reposition your hands. Then we can go backwards. Now I can pull with my right hand as I stitch to the left. So what we need to be doing is making sure those stitches are even. Then we can come forward. So if you sit and practice just doing something like a maze, just going in and out, teaching yourself how to control the speed of the needle. And as you get better, you'll be able to speed up because you would have learned how to move the fabric under the needle. Then you'll be able to go at a much faster speed. Now, one thing that happens here, if I'm stitching along and I've got my hands on my fabric to keep the pressure on it, as I'm stitching, if I move my hands as I stitch, it'll jump to the side because we've lost the pressure off the fabric. So to avoid any of that and to avoid sitting at my machine like this with my thumbs forward and my elbows out, if you don't already know about the purple quilting hoop, this is a weighted hoop, so much weight in it. This is the pressure. So put this on the machine. So instead of sitting like this and keeping the pressure around the needle with your hands and forcing your elbows out and your shoulders up, try using the hoop, because you then will sit completely back in your chair, put your shoulders right back in the chair. I've got the machine tilted so I can see the needle. I've got my table low and my chair just at a nice height, and off I go. Now, if you stitch like this, you'll find you'll get your stitches perfectly even all the time. Now, if I take one hand off, my stitch does not change. It stays perfectly as it should. So I absolutely believe 100% in this hoop and the mat underneath, and it will start to make you a much better quilter. A lot of people have purchased these hoops through the years, but when they tell me they can't use them, it doesn't work for them, I see them trying to use it like this. I see that their fingers are forward or their thumbs forward like this, which instantly is putting too much pressure on the hoop, which puts too much pressure on the fabric. It also will send your elbows out. It'll send your shoulders up. So we're going to put thumb to finger, and all we're going to do is have our thumb and the first finger on the hoop. Elbows tucked in. I always say to everybody that I teach free motion quilting to, have manners at your sewing machine. No elbows, no wings. Tuck them in. Use the hoop. Then you can stitch wherever you want to stitch. Now I'm going to stop and I'm now going to do some other free motion. I'm going to do some teardrops. So I'm doing a little teardrop. I'm then going to come around it again. I'm going to do another teardrop. And if you're a beginner, stop at the end of the teardrop. Now don't try and drive the fabric around under the needle. You've got to glide it. It's all about gliding. It's all about stitching at the right speed so you can control that curve. As I said on the introduction, it's like driving a car. If you're going to go flat out and really erratic, you're going to crash at the corners. So as a beginner, start slow, take your time. You could draw this shape onto your fabric. You could use one of our dot-to-dot templates and put some beautiful designs on your fabrics. It took me a long time to teach myself shapes, and the only way I could learn to do shapes was sit at my machine, draw patterns onto my fabric and stitch over and over and over the shape till I developed a muscle memory in my brain. It's like learning to write your name. And talking about writing your name, one of the best things you can start teaching yourself at your machine is how to stitch your name out. Because we know how to do that because we've taught our brain how the shapes work. So just sit at your machine and write words with your machine. Your needle is like a pencil. Just guide with the hoop under that needle and teach yourself how to write names. And it's very, very easy to do because you've developed that muscle memory. But to do our feathers, our spirals, our teardrops, all of those beautiful shapes we can put onto quilts, it takes time to practice, and that's what you need to do. Let me know how you go, because I'd love to help you on the journey of getting you better and better at free motion quilting. And don't forget, I now do all of my quilts quilt as you go, because this is my beautiful machine. I'm not wanting to upgrade to something bigger, not just yet anyway. But if I want to put a whole big quilt through here, it's too much for this space. It's too much to move through. So that's why I'm now doing all my quilts quilt as you go. So watch all of our YouTube videos and learn how you can do that too. So when you go onto our YouTube channel, please subscribe, hit that bell, hit it hard, so that you're going to then get a notification when all of our new videos are out for you to learn from us at PQW. Also go to our website, www.pqw.com.au. Have a look around. Subscribe to our newsletter, because we've got some exciting things coming, and I would love for you to get our regular newsletters and to stay in touch. So happy quilting. Don't forget all the little tips that I've just given you. It's my way that I quilt, and I find it, I'm so relaxed at the machine, and it's made me a much better quilter. So bye for now.